water, earth, fire, air. The story of the Avatar begins thousands of years before the birth of Aang and his heroic adventure in which, along with his friends, he defeated Fire Lord Osai and ended the 100-Year War. The story really begins when humans lived in small villages located on the backs of turtle lions. In those times, each village lived isolated from the others, and people only left the safety of their village to go to the forest of spirits to get food. When this happened, the turtle lion temporarily lent them control over one of the four elements so they could protect themselves. But everything changed when a young man named Wan was banished from his village and forced to survive among the spirits. This young man, after making a serious mistake, was forced to correct it, and for this, he had to convince the four turtle lions to let him keep the power of the four elements. Wan then would become the first in charge of balancing the forces of light and darkness, humans and spirits of the world. Juan would become the first avatar, the first person within a cycle of rebirth to show us the power that comes from balance and a Taoist concept called Wu Wei. Hello dear geekers, how are you? I am Go, the Geek Monitor, and I welcome you to a new entry of Beyond the Obvious, a series of videos in which I analyze children's series to discover their hidden meaning. Today I'm going to tell you how the Avatar series talks to us about the philosophy of balance and Taoism to finally discover what the true power of the Avatar is. You'll see that if we look closer, we can find very complex and interesting concepts behind these seemingly children's stories.
Go, the Geek Monitor!
Chapter 1. The Balance of Yin-Yang. One day, Wan, before becoming the first avatar, found two spirits fighting in the forest. They were Raba, the spirit of light and order, and Batu, the spirit of darkness and chaos. Both spirits had been fighting for a long time without one being able to subdue the other, but when Wan arrived, Batu took the opportunity to deceive him and make him get Rava off him. When this happened, Batu took the opportunity to escape and set out to go to the villages of men to sow chaos. This was Wan's mistake. He broke the balance between both spirits, and now darkness had more strength, while light was weakening. A mistake that would eventually lead Wan to become the first avatar, a being who would seek the balance of the world's forces. The balance that exists between Rava and Batu can be found in this ancient symbol called Taijitu, a symbol that contains a yin part and a yang part, so we commonly just call it yin-yang. According to Taoist philosophy, each of the concepts we have in the world can be represented by each of these sections. Or winter are yin, while light, the masculine, and spring are yang. However, it is a very common mistake to think that the yin-yang is a symbol that represents a conflict between two concepts, something like light versus darkness or good versus evil. Instead, it is a symbol that represents the coexistence of two assumptions. The night yin eventually turns into the day, which is yang, just as the winter yin also turns into the spring, which is also yang. The elements that the masters control within the Avatar universe also form part of the yin-yang. The air and fire masters are part of the yang, while the earth and water masters are part of the yin. Zuko's great-grandfather seems to completely ignore, as using the power of the Sozin comet, he set out to end the air nomads with the intention of murdering the new avatar, thus completely breaking with the balance of the world and the person who could help restore it. After this, we see how the Fire Nation tries to dominate the whole world with a war that is harmful to all nations, including the Fire Nation, whose inhabitants we see have lost some traditions, part of their history, their holidays, and in some cases even suffer from hunger and diseases. Certain characters like Osai or Commander Sao are willing to break the balance, but they do not realize the consequences this can bring them. On the other hand, Ero, who is a very wise person, is aware of the importance of this balance and is willing to betray the rulers of his nation, as this is what really benefits the Fire Nation in the long run. In this case, the Avatar is not only the person who can bring balance to the world, he is a character whose story represents balance itself. Let's look at it this way. At the beginning of his story, Aang is a character who masters air control, has a good relationship with his spiritual side, and throughout his adventure, he has to learn to master the other elements. Korra, the next avatar, is a character who masters all elements except air control, and throughout her adventure, she has to learn to be more in touch with the spirits. The interesting thing here is that Korra, despite being yin, a side that represents the feminine water and cold, is a character with much more active and impulsive characteristics than Aang, which tells us that there is also a yang within the yin. This is represented by the points within each side. Aang, on the other hand, is yang, as it is the side that represents the masculine, air and light, although he also has some passive characteristics of the yin. That's why Rava and Vatu can't destroy each other. Both spirits are part of the same system. When one of them defeats the other, the light within Vatu or the darkness within Rava transforms into the new opposing spirit, thus maintaining balance. This balance is part of what Taoists need to be able to enter a state known as Wu Wei, something the series exemplifies in a way as the Avatar state. Chapter 2. Wu Wei and the Avatar state. While the yin-yang symbol is an important part of Taoist philosophy, it is only a fragment of it. Another concept that we also see in the Avatar series is something that Taoists call Wu Wei, which is the concept of the action of inaction or effortless action. This is a rather strange concept for those of us who were raised in the West, as we are educated to be active people who take actions and achieve results through effort. Work hard for success. If you take things easy, you will be a failure. However, for Taoist philosophy, you have to learn to flow and be in harmony with something called Tao, an essential energy that cannot be named, something that is achieved with mental stillness and being aware of your senses. This is something similar to what Aang has to go through to be able to master the Avatar state. When he trains with Guru Pathik at the Eastern Air Temple, he tries to unlock each of his chakras through meditation and introspection. As Aang unlocks each chakra, his spiritual energy flows uninterrupted. The metaphor of the spiritual river lets his spiritual energy flow on. This metaphor of the spiritual river and the act of letting it flow is very similar to some Taoist stories where they exemplify unnecessary effort as swimming against the current of a river. We can also see this concept in the training of several spinning boards without touching them, an impossible feat to perform if you think about it, as you cannot predict where the boards will spin. Instead, Tenzin, Aang's son, teaches Korra that she has to breathe, have mental stillness, and flow with the energy to be able to achieve it. When Korra manages to combine mental stillness with action, she enters this state where each of her actions is performed completely effortlessly, flowing naturally with the energy of the Tao. In the real world, musicians and athletes often enter this special state where they seem to move by instinct. So, when someone is in the Wu Wei state, they know when to act and when not to. In other words, they find a balance between action and inaction, something that both Aang and Korra have to learn to master in order to fully use the Avatar state. It's not just about having power, but knowing when to use it. It turns out that all these teachings lead the Avatar to use the greatest power of all, one that has the ability to move entire nations and is even more powerful than the Avatar state. Chapter 3. The True Power of the Avatar. Where does the true power of the Avatar reside? The intro of The Legend of Korra, which is narrated by Tenzin, Aang's youngest son, says the phrase only the Avatar can master the four elements and bring balance to the world. On the other hand, most of the chapters of The Legend of Aang also deal with his quest to try to master the four elements and thus be able to defeat Fire Lord Ozai. This tells us that mastering the elements is one of the central points of being an avatar. However, it is not for the reasons we regularly believe, as we tend to think of the elements as if they were weapons. The more elements you master, the more weapons you have, so you are more powerful, and this is not the case. In fact, both Aang and Korra are characters who have been defeated in hand-to-hand combat by other people who only have mastery of one element, so more elements does not necessarily mean more power. Perhaps then you think their true power lies in the avatar state. This might make sense, as Aang was able to defeat entire armies in this state, but then why bother mastering the four elements? Why didn't Aang simply seek to master the avatar state as suggested by General Fong of the Earth Kingdom? It turns out that this state also does not represent the greatest power of the avatar. The real importance of mastering the four elements is the fact that, in order to do so, one needs to understand each of the four nations well. Mastering the elements then does not represent an act of control or power. It means having the ability to understand the potential and needs of each of the nations, especially of their inhabitants. Not only that, but the avatar is also the bridge between humans and spirits, which allows him to understand both worlds. Add to all this the fact that the avatar has the experience of all his past lives, and we come to the realization that the figure of the avatar, more than physical power, represents the necessary wisdom to change the world. This wisdom, which has to do with knowing when to act and when not to, we can see it in Aang's final battle against Fire Lord Sai. Aang could well have killed the Fire Lord using the avatar state. Everyone said he had to do it, but Aang was wiser and took the action that would bring more balance to the world. Similarly, Korra's decision to leave the spiritual portal open was quite rejected by humans who did not want to coexist with the spirits. However, it turned out to be the right decision, as this meant the rebirth of the Air Nation, which finally brought balance to the world after the 100-Year War. The Avatar series shows us that the ability to change the world does not come from physical strength, but from the wisdom to balance the chaotic forces that threaten the world. Beyond kings, conquerors, presidents, and fire lords, the Avatar is a force of nature, an almost religious figure with the power to see beyond what we humans regularly cannot or do not want to see, thus managing to balance nations, spirits, and even history itself. Don't go yet. If you like this episode of Beyond the Obvious, I'm going to leave you with this playlist with other videos from the same series where I talk about the Megamind, Kung Fu Panda, Toy Story, or Rango. You're sure to like them. I am Go, the Geek Monitor, and I'll see you in the next video.